Listen, there are a lot of podcasts about the Black church in the vein of Larry Reed and King Jives.
Yikes.
But if you're looking for a podcast about the Black church that's thoughtful, informative, substantive, stimulating, then you need to subscribe to Black Church Chats. That's right. I need you to hit that subscribe button and then also hit the notification bell so that you'll know every time we go live. All right, on to the show.
What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday to you. I hope you and yours are well. I hope you're having a wonderful day. If you're not having a wonderful day, I hope it gets better. Listen, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, I need you to subscribe. Doesn't cost you a dime to subscribe. It's completely free. And y'all know how it goes here. We talk about very important, substantive topics. Listen, I don't want to make y'all on the East Coast mad. And there's this little fly in here that's just been bothering me since I got to the office. I don't want to make y'all on the East Coast mad. Hey, auntie, my auntie, Melissa, my aunties, Melissa and Millicent are here. Good to see you. Good to see you. My day is going well. But I don't want to make y'all on the East Coast mad. I'm praying for y'all. I know it's cold out there, but right now in my office, it feels like a sauna. I'm gonna have to get the air conditioner on before I go live in a few hours, because right now, y'all, it's like a sweatshop up in my office. And again, I'm not trying to make y'all on the East Coast mad. I know y'all are cold right now, but that ain't my testimony on today. But anyway, hello, how are you? I hope you and yours are well. Welcome to Black Church Chats. I'm your host, Pastor Isaiah. And this conversation today is a conversation that hey, First Lady is here, y'all. This is the First Lady of the New Congregational Missionary Baptist Church, and my wife, she's here. So, listen, when First Lady is watching, I got to be on my best behavior. And so I will certainly do that. But listen, y'all, I've been meaning to talk about this for quite some time, and I've had to postpone this show a few times. Shout out to those of you that inboxed me and asked me about this show and when I'm going to do it. Well, I'm going to do it right now. I have been putting it off and having to postpone it, but we're going to talk about it. And we need to talk about it because if you've been in church for any amount of time, you know a thing or two or three about conflict. It's unavoidable. It's going to happen. There's no way that you can matriculate through Sunday school, BTU, ushering, deaconing, pastoring, choiring, and not experience conflict. Listen, biblically, here's what happens. The church is established. Most people believe that the church is established in Acts chapter 2. It is said in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, that these converts to Christianity, that they continue in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and the breaking of bread. So it looks like harmony. It looks like all things are copacetic and going well for the converts there in Jerusalem. But by the time we get to Acts 6, what do we see? We see conflict between the Hellenist Jewish widows and the Jewish widows, and the conflict has to be addressed. The conflict is addressed, and then we get to Acts chapter 15. And what do we see when we get to Acts chapter 15? Conflict. There's a disagreement about the Gentile converts, whether or not they need to adhere to the law of Moses. They call the Jerusalem Council. And so even in the early church, there's conflict. We often romanticize the early church. Oh, if we could be more like the early church. Listen, don't romanticize the early church. All right. What about the church in Corinth? They were a hot mess. They had conflict everywhere, and Paul had to address it. In the book of Revelation, we see early churches being written to because they're out of order doctrinally, theologically and otherwise. So stop romanticizing the early church. The early church had problems as well. And so today we're going to talk about navigating conflict in the Black church. This show is called Black Church Chats. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today, I think, is generally and universally applicable. But I do think that conflict is different within the Black church, particularly for a few reasons. Number one, historically, the Black church has meant more to us than churches typically mean to those of other ethnicities. What do I mean? Well, historically, and when I say we, I'm referring to Black people, Black bodies, we became somebody when we entered into a Black church. Historically, Monday through Saturday, we were demeaned. We were working menial jobs. We were discriminated against. We were called boy, the N-word, all sorts of stuff, right? And then Sunday rolled around. And on Sunday, guess what? We were the president of such and such auxiliary, the chairman of such and such auxiliary, pastor, deacon, mother, deaconess. So historically, we vested a lot of meaning, and to be honest, our identity in a lot of ways was formed and shaped by the Black church. And so the church has meant more to us than I think the church has meant to other ethnicities, because we gained dignity. We were respected within the Black church, and we felt energized by that. And so we have to understand that history when we deal with conflict, because conflict in the Black church is oftentimes about more than just the issue. Conflict within the Black church oftentimes is drilling down to identity, worth, value. And so that's one of the reasons why I think conflict within the Black church is different than conflict in other churches, in non-Black churches. The second reason why I think conflict within the Black church is different than conflict within non-Black churches is because of the historical trauma that we carry. All right, listen, we have gone through, as a people, we have gone through 400 years of chattel slavery. We've gone through slave codes, Black codes. We've gone through exploitation via sharecropping. What's up, Chris? Salute to you. We've gone through Jim Crow. We've gone through racial terror, the KKK. We've gone through mass incarceration. We've gone through the war on drugs. We've gone through quote unquote urban renewal. We've gone through all sorts of traumatic experiences outside of church. We are hands down the most traumatized community in these yet to be United States. And we bring all that trauma into church as well. All that trauma follows us, which is one of the reasons why the Black church has to be intentional and serious about mental health. But I digress. That trauma is there. So when there is conflict in the Black church, man, that conflict is touching on a lot of unresolved trauma issues that are deeper than just the issue that's bringing about the conflict. And And so for those two reasons, I think that conflict is unique. It's different within the Black church. Every church faces conflict. Every local assembly is going to deal with conflict. You won't be able to escape it. Anywhere there's people, there will be conflict. But I do think that conflict is different within the African American context for those reasons that I just shared. I'm somebody, listen, I can talk on this subject authoritatively because I've experienced conflict in ministry numerous times, more times than I'd like to count. I think my most peaceful time in ministry, well, right now is a particularly peaceful time in ministry. I'm having a ball pastoring a new Congregational Missionary Baptist Church here in South Central LA. So right now it's particularly peaceful. But when I was a youth pastor, I was a youth pastor for years. And when I was a youth pastor, peaceful. Not a lot of conflict. And then I planted a church. Things were going well. And then things blew up. And there was conflict in a church plant. So listen, for all of you guys, man, I'm going to plant a church. I'm not trying to pastor an established church. I don't want to put in no resumes and go through no church search process and none of that stuff. And you're doing that thinking that you will avoid conflict in a church plant. I know people that planted a church and the church became successful, thriving, and then they were ultimately ousted out of the church that they planted. So church planting doesn't solve the conflict problem. Okay? So don't think that I planted a church. Things were going well until they weren't. Conflict arose, boom. Then I went from there. I became an associate pastor at a church. And that was relatively peaceful up until it was time for me to leave. There was some conflict at that point. And then I was called to a church, an established church. And I served a wonderful, phenomenal church in Cartersville, Georgia. Shout out to Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. Still love that church. Still love the people. The pastor there, Keith Knox, phenomenal. If you're anywhere near Cartersville, need to go to Macedonia. That was a relatively peaceful time as well. Didn't have much conflict there, although we did have to deal with some issues. There were some problems that we had to get through, but it wasn't out of the ordinary. And then I moved back to Southern California from Atlanta. I was in Atlanta for 16 years, and I moved back to Southern California to pastor a church in Compton. And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but if you know my journey, if you know my story, boom, I'm talking about extremely contentious church meetings. I'm talking about hospitalized due to stress. I'm talking about it was deep. It was deep. Okay. Not going to go into it. I've talked about it on this channel. If you're interested, you can check my previous broadcast. Not going to go into it here, but I did experience severe conflict there. So much so that I ended up resigning from that church. And that decision, guess what that decision did? It brought about an end to the conflict. We're going to talk about that, right? Pastor, if you're listening, should you consider resigning? When should you consider resigning? We're going to talk about that. Left that church, subsequently called to where I pastor now, the New Congregational Missionary Baptist Church. And it's been peaceful here. We did have a little bit of conflict. Toward the end of I want to say 2024, some things arose. There was some conflict that occurred. We weathered it. And we're great now. Things are great now. Things are wonderful. But I went through that whole sort of chronological explanation just to say to you, Pastor, just to say to you, associate, just to say to you, lay member, just to say to you that I know of which I speak. I know about conflict, experienced it, dealt with it, and I think that my anecdotes and my suggestions, opinions are valid. All right. I have some notes here, and I want to talk about why conflict arises. Some of the reasons why churches are hurled into conflict. And I want to spend some time kind of unpacking the why as a way to kind of set the stage for some of the solutions that I'm going to share. I'm Baptist, and if you're Baptist, you know the Baptists know how to fight. All right. If you're Baptist and you grew up Baptist, then you've heard stories of pistols being brought to business meetings. You've heard stories of fisticuffs breaking out in church services. I listen. What I almost pulled clips from YouTube. You can go to YouTube and you can actually search like church fights, and you can see this stuff. And I almost pulled those clips to play them here, but I didn't want to do that because these churches have probably moved on. But if you're Baptist, you know that Baptists know how to fight. And I will say this before I get into some of the reasons behind, why conflict arises. I will say this, that I really think that my Kojic and my African Methodist Episcopal brothers and sisters have a clearer and easier process and pathway to deal with conflict. And here's why. Because within the Kojic denomination and the AME denominations, they practice what's called connectional polity. So every local church is under the jurisdiction of sort of a regional governing body. And you can have a bishop that makes a unilateral decision, and that unilateral decision could potentially diffuse a lot of the conflict, because it's just boom, we're gonna do this, and the fallout is gonna happen, and then the dust is gonna settle, and it's gonna be what it's gonna be. Within the Baptist church, where local churches are autonomous, you can have churches in conflict for 10, 20, 30 years without any real resolution. And so let's talk about some of the reasons why conflict arises. So number one, let's talk about leadership and authority tensions. Look, it used to be that, particularly within the African American community, people just respected clergy. Even if they were unchurched, even if they didn't attend church at all. It used to be within the Black community, there was just kind of this general respect for clergy. That respect, yeah, and then when family is involved, that's a whole different animal to add to the equation. That's right, Chris. A lot of that respect, y'all, has eroded. And some of it has eroded for good reason. Okay? You do listen. If you listen to this broadcast, you know that although I'm pro black church, I also critique the black church. And I do not have to tell you that there's spiritual abuse within some black churches. There's theological malpractice within some black churches. There's financial chicanery within some black churches. There is a thirst for celebrity within some black churches. So I'm not going to say that some of that respect has been lost without warrant or without reason. This is where, and I'm a pastor, but this is where we pastors have to kind of ask ourselves, how have we contributed to that erosion of respect? And now we're kind of living in a milieu, in a day and an age where, you know, like, look, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you have a collar. That'll make me no different. And so you have pastors that are idealistic, pastors that have vision, pastors that are excited, pastors who are excited to implement different ideas, you know, help the congregation embrace a paradigm shift, but that doesn't always go well. And that historical kind of deference and respect that used to exist doesn't exist anymore. And then here's the real problem. Oftentimes the bylaws, the church bylaws, do not clarify the extent of pastoral power. Oftentimes the bylaws don't provide sort of role clarity, right? And so where there is no clarity and where there are no governing documents that provide clarity, chaos ensues. And yes, you have scripture, but if you're a pastor, then you know, listen, and this is just real talk. If you're a pastor, then you know that when conflict arises, what's up, JM? Salute to you. When conflict arises, you have some people, maybe even some leaders, they don't care what scripture has to say. They don't care. They don't care. It's like, no, okay, I hear that, but. And then there are some cases where the members have a better handle and understanding of the scriptures on a particular issue and in a particular area than the pastor. And you do have some cases where the pastor's like, well, I don't care what the Bible has said about that. This is what I want to do. And you do have conflict. You know, the rule of thumb, particularly in black churches, is when you're called to a church, you know, the first year you observe, the second year you really build relationships. You know, I talked to a pastor, and you know, he said, a more seasoned pastor, and he said, and I tend to agree, that you know, you really don't become the pastor of a church until after about the 5th year. You may have the title, but that doesn't necessarily mean you've earned the right. Just because you're called to pastor doesn't mean you've earned the right to pastor. And you can have that type of leadership clash. And then people take sides, and then, you know, it gets messy. So that's one reason why conflict arises, just leadership issues. And some of those leadership issues kind of are surfaced, and here's the second one, when there is a tension between change and tradition. Listen, here's another reason why conflict arises. Some people like doing things the way they like doing it. Some people aren't open. But then you have some people that are in a rush, that are in a hurry to quote unquote modernize. You have some people that are like, nope, this is it. You have some people that are like, no, there's a better way. And boom, the tension between change and tradition is one that brings about one that can bring about chaos. We're going to talk about some solutions in a second. I'm just laying out some of the reasons why, but we're going to talk about solutions. And I already know that in your mind, you're probably thinking about some solutions as well. But, you know, we talked about leadership and authority. We talked about change versus tradition. Here's another cause of conflict: money and transparency. Did you know that a church can be doing everything above board financially and still fall into conflict because of lack of transparency? And, you know, the governing body may have good reason to not divulge certain information, but then you may have some members that just want to know, need to know, have to know. And then you have some churches where there is financial mismanagement. And the reason why financial conflict is so severe and so toxic and so dangerous is because this is the tithe money we're talking about. You'll often hear people say, I didn't authorize the church to pay for that. That's my money. And they're not entirely wrong. You'll get people that will scream from the rooftops, y'all, we are the ones bankrolling and financing this church. And so money and transparency around money can certainly cause conflict, and churches really have to negotiate, you know, how much they divulge, how transparent they're going to be, and we're going to talk about that as well. You're probably thinking of some other reasons. I jotted some things down. You're probably thinking of some other reasons. You know, there could be, you know, issues of morality. Conflict arises. There could be issues of, hey, mom two is here. Mom two is in the building. Hey, mom two. There could be issues of, you know, relational strain. There's a new choir director is called, and maybe the church had a deep affinity for the choir director that was dismissed, and so now there's relational strain. There are other reasons why conflict arises. I just really wanted to highlight some of the main reasons why, you know, leadership and authority tensions, change versus tradition, money and transparency. And so here's why it's so important to talk about this, because pastors approach conflict in different ways. And church leaders and lay members approach conflict in different ways. Some pastors are conflict averse. They don't like it. They don't want to deal with it. They try to kick the can down the road. And hear me, this is particularly prevalent in Baptist churches. And here's why. Because a pastor in a Baptist church that runs like a Baptist church can be ousted. Most of them can be ousted with just a simple majority vote. And so where that is the case, you have pastors that can become extremely political. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a reconciler. As a matter of fact, that is godly. Blessed are the peacemakers, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting harmony and a cohesive environment. And there's nothing wrong with the desire to have a happy environment and for everyone to be happy. All of that is okay. The problem is when the impulse to be political leads to people pleasing. And the pastor becomes kind of the get along, to go along type of leader, and conflict is unaddressed. Hear me. You are not called to pastor if you are unwilling to address conflict. That's just you just if you are more afraid to offend than you are to establish order and pastor, it's going to be a tough job. So there are the conflict averse pastors and lay members. You as well. You can also have lay members that are conflict averse. Oh, let's just not talk about it. Let's just not deal with it. That doesn't mean it's gone. It just festers. Then what you have, I call them the conflict Rambos. Pastors, lay people, the conflict Rambos. Oh, wait, what? Is some conflict? Oh. What's up? Nah. Yeah, you want to fight? Let's fight. And I'm going to fight with an extremely heavy hand. There are some pastors that solve conflict by squashing any type of dissent, by refusing to allow people to have opinions. There are some leaders that are like, this is how I deal with conflict. I kick people out. Now there are some circumstances where if you have a church member that's unruly or that's teaching false doctrine, publicly, blatantly, unrepentantly living in sin, there are some situations where, like, yes, you need to go. But you do have some pastors that'll be like, oh, you disagree? You disagree with me changing the carpet color? Okay, peace. Move your membership. You out of here. Oh wait, you disagreeing with it? Out of here, right? And so some people attempt to resolve conflict through dictatorship, and that's also toxic. This is one thing that I realize. This is one thing that I realize, y'all. And I tell my deacons this. I tell my trustees this. I tell my members this. New Congregational isn't just my church. Jesus is the head of the church. But New Congregational isn't just my church. New Congregational is our church. And we all should care about it. And when you care about something, guess what? You have thoughts and opinions. You have ideas about how it can improve. You see things that aren't healthy or helpful. And guess what? Whenever there is dictatorship, you know what the people will do? The people will say, okay, all right, this is your thing. And guess what? They'll stay. They won't leave. They'll stay and just resign. And say, okay, this is your thing. You got it. And so those approaches aren't helpful. And here's also what exacerbates conflict, what makes conflict worse. Gossip. Gossip. Gossip is cancerous where there is conflict. Because here's the reality. Tales are spun. That's what gossip is. Tale bearing. And oftentimes those tales are not 100% accurate. They're skewed according to the perspective of the person spinning the tale. And once gossip infects a local community during a time of conflict, once it becomes widespread, man, things get worse and worse and worse and worse. Gossip is cancerous and corrosive. And then you get to the point, guess what? You know it's bad. You know it's bad when people outside of the church know what's going on. You know it's bad when the name of the church is brought up and you got people cross town that know what's happening at XYZ church, or they know a certain perspective of what's happening. And so that is toxic. And then here's what happens when there's severe conflict. And here's what's at stake, y'all. The spiritual credibility of that congregation erodes. When there is severe conflict, the spiritual credibility of that congregation suffers because we're supposed to be Christians. And yes, we are human. So conflict will arise, but we're supposed to possess the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience. And it's in conflict when that fruit is supposed to be manifested. So if the conflict is deep enough and severe enough, all of a sudden people look around. And when I say people, you listen, you have to understand that visitors are coming, non-members may be there, and they may not know fully what's going on. All right, they may not know the full story, but y'all, they can sense it. You can when a church is experiencing deep, severe conflict, like you can pick that up. You can look and you can see. Man, something's off. And that ultimately impacts the witness and the spiritual reputation of that particular local congregation. And so this is an opportunity. This conversation is an opportunity. Number one, for us to all woosah, particularly if you're listening to me right now and you're in the middle of a contentious situation. I want you to woosah. Maybe you're listening to me right now, and what's brought you here is the frustration that you feel because you're going through it. You're at a church right now where people are at it. And so, number one, before I start talking about solutions, let me just validate your frustration. And let me tell you, man, I empathize. I know how you feel. I've been there. And listen, the exhaustion and the frustration that you feel and that you experience. What's up, Pastor Kwame Crosby? That is our first vice moderator of our Pacific District Missionary Baptist Association. Love you, Doc. The exhaustion that you feel and the frustration that you feel in church conflict is, in my experience, deeper than the exhaustion and the frustration that you feel when you experience conflict in other places. Conflict at work is not as draining and exhausting as conflict in church. Conflict with your family. I'm talking about your biological family, right? And this may not be your experience. I'm just talking about me, okay? But for some of you guys are amening me right now because, listen, conflict with your biological family isn't as exhausting and draining as conflict with your church family. Church conflict, in my opinion, is the most exhausting, draining, frustrating, angering, depressing conflict that there is. So first, let me validate your frustration if you're here. Whether you're a pastor, whether you're a lay member, whoever you are. And I can particularly identify with you if you're a pastor because I've been there. And I know, particularly when you're a pastor and you feel like you're being unjustly, unfairly attacked and criticized, and you're at the center of the conflict because people disagree with you or because people have a problem with you, but maybe you've been moving, righteously and above board, things of that nature. Listen, Pastor, I want to identify. If you're a lay member and you're not, if you're a lay member and you're not adding to the fire, okay, I want to identify with you and I validate you as well, okay? It's not fun. It's not fun. It's not fun. So let's talk about some solutions. I want to say right off the bat that we don't, and when I say we, I'm talking about the Black church collectively. This is a generalization. I know there are exceptions to the rule, but I'm going to say it. We don't fully embrace and apply Jesus's words in Matthew 18 when he talks about the steps you are to take if and when a brother or a sister in the Lord sins against you. And the reason why I'm making this claim, and I write about this in my second book, Risks We Must Take. I write about how historically the Black church was really serious about, church discipline and having a structured church discipline process. And and historically the Black church did realize the need for church discipline, and they rooted that in Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 18, where he says, look, if your brother or sister sins against you, here are the steps. Go to them in private, number one. All right. They won't hear you. You have to then go back, take 2 or 3 witnesses. Jesus lays out this process, and listen, if we understood this and applied it, a lot of the conflict would end overnight. A lot of it would. Because how much conflict arises because we're going to everybody else except the person that sinned against us. Now, pastors, listen to me. We have to make it easy for our parishioners to practice Jesus' words in Matthew 18. What do I mean? Pastor, you may be called by God, but that doesn't mean that you don't sin and make mistakes. And you could potentially be the sinning brother that Jesus is referring to in Matthew chapter 18. Here's the question. Can somebody come to you privately? And can somebody say to you, Pastor, you hurt me, or you did this, or you did that? Listen, what Jesus says in Matthew 18 cannot be normalized, will never be normalized in our churches if the pastor is impervious and if the pastor is not willing to follow that same process. But that's number one. Number one solution, y'all. Matthew 18. Some of this stuff needs to be dealt with privately rather than digitally. Blasting one another on social media. Matthew, read it, reread it, commit it to memory, saints, and follow it. And listen, I'm going to go further and say that if you are at a congregation that ignores Jesus' words in Matthew 18, right? You're a lay member and you're like, hey, look, or you're a pastor, like, then you need to start praying, because Jesus has told us how to deal with this stuff. And it's a matter of us understanding it and applying it. You need to start praying. And listen, you may need to uproot and go somewhere where the spirit of Matthew 18 is honored. I also want to say this as a solution. I also want to say this, and this is to pastors particularly, but lay members. This is something that you also need to consider and think about. A lot of conflict could be resolved easily if there was clarity with the bylaws. And I referred to this earlier. I talked about this earlier in the broadcast. Churches are ultimately governed by the word of God. But we should also have bylaws that stipulate certain things, drill down in certain areas. The bylaws should clarify the pastoral scope of authority. The bylaws should clarify the roles and responsibilities of deacons, trustees. The bylaws should clarify what happens if the pastor resigns or is ousted. The bylaws should clarify how someone becomes a new member. What are the expectations of new members? How often the church scrubs the rolls. The bylaws should clarify. There are a whole lot of churches in this country, particularly black churches, that need to undergo a bylaw review. Because if you hadn't changed your bylaws since 1974, 1962, I guarantee you're vulnerable. And conflict, it becomes more corrosive where there is not clarity. Also, listen, y'all. Listen. Here's a question that we all need to ask in conflict. And I don't think this question is asked enough, because here's what can happen when there's conflict. If the conflict persists, what can eventually happen is that people just develop a strong desire to win. It becomes no, I gotta win. We gotta win. And once the desire to win becomes greater than the desire to flourish, you're in trouble. And so here's the question that we all need to ask. Pastor Pews, what's more important here? Restoration or victory? What is more important? Harmony or victory? What is more important? Peace or victory? And here's the reality. Listen, here's the reality. Sometimes you cannot have both. Sometimes it gets to the point where you, pastor, you lay member, you have to choose. And then you have to pray and negotiate and navigate what it looks like for you to not win. But that question needs to be front of mind, because here's what happens in conflict. And I said it, it could turn into, no, I've got to win. We've got to win. So I'm going to dig in, and more harm is done, and more harm is done. And the reality is you may ultimately win, but at what cost? You may get exactly what you wanted, but at what cost? So these are some questions in conflict that we need to ask ourselves. What's more important, harmony or victory? What's more important, peace or victory? What's more important, purpose or victory? Sometimes you can have both. Sometimes you can't. And you have to be objective enough to step back and know when is, what's what. Also, listen, y'all, listen. Call me old school. Call me a throwback. Call me whatever you want to call me. I've been called worse. I understand. I don't push back against those accusations and allegations, because in a lot of ways I am old school. In a lot of Baptist churches, there's this thing called the church covenant. And I know a lot of people want to move away from the church covenant. I know within a lot of our churches, we've taken down the church covenant, or if we haven't taken it down, it's just we may still have it up, but it's just a relic. Doesn't really mean anything. Here's the thing about particularly the Baptist church covenant. If you're Baptist, you know about the church covenant. Here's the thing about the church covenant. The church covenant is old. It's been around since the 1800s. It's old. I get it. And so some of the wording is archaic. Some of the wording is, it reflects the time period. And that is the case. That is true. However, when you read the covenant, y'all, the covenant is a really good summary statement of what upon joining a church. It's a really good summary statement of what our commitment should be to God and what our commitment should be to one another within a local assembly. And I really think that we ought to either re-implement the covenant, or, Pastor, if you're completely opposed to re-implementing the covenant, then create something. Create something comparable. And teach on it. And talk about it. Make it a part of your new members class. Because sometimes we have conflict because there aren't clear, outlined expectations. And so, yes, I talked about bylaws earlier, but if you have good bylaws, we talk about 25, 30 pages. Covenant, what, about 6, 7 paragraphs? And y'all, it is powerful. During a church meeting, everybody's arguing, step up to the mic and say, aren't we organized around this covenant? Here's what the covenant says. Is this what's happening? And so there and so there's that. So there's that. Also, like, I think too that a solution I haven't talked about is the need for accountability as well. What I mean by that is are the troublemakers just given license to make trouble? Or do people see that the troublemakers are held accountable? There needs to be an accountability at all levels. But what I mean is that what is the incentive to not be contentious or to not engage in conflict when I know I can stir stuff up and ain't nobody gonna say nothing to me? Ain't nobody gonna do nothing to me. So I think that we need to ask ourselves, what does accountability look like in our church? And what process is there that will give me cause for pause before I decide to move in a divisive way? Now listen. Sometimes conflict is demonically designed to sabotage mission and purpose. So let me say this. In some cases, the conflict that you are experiencing requires a spiritual solution. Let me step back. All conflict requires a spiritual solution. So yes, you pray, and yes, you operate biblically. But there is some conflict that arises as a targeted attack, demonic attack, to topple the vision, the mission of that local church. Spiritual warfare is real. And so this is when a congregation has to be discerning enough to step back and understand, okay, wait a minute, this is demonic. And we up here fighting one another when this is the enemy is just laughing. It does take a lot, because once the wheels are in motion and conflict is raging, we do tend to look at one another as the enemy. And so sometimes it is hard to pull back from that place and space where the enemy is now the person in front of you in the pew rather than Satan and his minions. But sometimes the solution is fast, pray, call a solemn assembly. We're not having a business meeting today. All we're going to do is pray for the whole hour. Listen, what we're going to fast as a church for 30 days. Listen, here's what's going to happen. We're going to wake up every morning at 6 a.m. We're going to get on a conference line and we're going to pray. Here's what's going on. We're going to have special Bible studies throughout the day where we're going to bring in somebody and this person is going to teach us. Like, sometimes this is the solution. Now, there are some instances where, look, you just got cantankerous people. Okay, and you have to deal with the conflict, a little bit more practically. But sometimes it is a spiritual battle, a spiritual attack. Now, I'm about to go because I'll be back on at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. As a matter of fact, come back on with me because it's 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. As a matter of fact, let me show you starting tonight. I'll be doing my annual Black Church History lectures. I'll be doing it here on YouTube as well as on our church's Facebook page. That's 6:30 p.m. tonight. So I don't want to go too long here and now because I'll be back on, and I want you to join me for the Black Church History lectures. But yeah, I do want to take just a moment to say, and I already touched on this, but I do want to say, Pastor, I want to talk directly to you, Pastor. How are you taking care of yourself? If you're watching me right now and you're experiencing conflict in your church, how are you taking care of yourself? Because let me say this to you. Your family needs you more than your church does. How are you taking care of yourself? I spoke earlier on an earlier broadcast about my experience where I resigned from a church after experiencing very, very severe conflict. And so I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not going to talk about that story. I've gone through that story before. I'm not going to talk about it here. But I want to say this because pastors, we often don't hear this. I want to say this. Resigning is an option. I know that you're not going to hear that, especially within the black church. You talk to other pastors. If you're experiencing conflict, you talk to other pastors. Most pastors say, "Doc, stay, fight." And yes, that could be the solution in some cases, in many cases even. But listen, Pastor, you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them. You got to know when the only solution is you resigning, and when you can weather the storm and maybe see it through. There are some cases, I'm going to say this, there are some cases where the only way peace can be established in a local church is by the resignation, the exiting of the pastor. And that's something that you got to pray about. That's between you and God. But I do want to ask you, Pastor, how are you taking care of yourself? You're in conflict. How are you taking care of yourself? Church conflict can age you rapidly. Church conflict can stress you out dramatically. And my prayer, Pastor, is that you prioritize your health and your family through the conflict. This is mom number 2, y'all. This is my second mom. She's saying, "I can't wait, Pastor. I'll be joining you at 6:30 p.m. Thank you, Mama. I'm so glad that you're going to be on. I want everybody to be on 6:30 p.m. tonight, East Coast, Central, West Coast. You guys be on East Coast, 9:30 p.m., Central, 8:30 p.m. here on the West Coast, 6:30 p.m. and I think 7:30 p.m. in like New Mexico or somewhere like that. Listen, I want you guys to be here. The first installment, the topic is 5 defining moments in Black church history. It is Black History Month, y'all. And this is one of the ways our church celebrates Black History Month. Every year we do Black church history lectures, and I've got some exciting, stimulating lectures planned. I'm going to be live here as well as the Facebook. I want you to be there. I'm about to get off, y'all. I didn't want to be on long. I want to preserve my voice for the lecture tonight. Again, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I want you here for the Black Church History virtual lecture. All right. If you are a pastor, a church leader, there is a project that we've launched. And when I say we, the organization I lead is entitled Black Church Empowered. I've launched an initiative along with, in partnership with the organization called the AND Campaign. It's called the Sacred Memory Project. It is a way that we are pushing back against the historical revisionism that is occurring right now in our country. This government is hostile toward Black history. And I've asked Black churches to answer the call and become a protector and a purveyor of Black history. And so we've launched this project called the Sacred Memory Project. We so far we're at like 58 churches that have registered. It is completely free. If you're a pastor, listen to me right now. I want you to watch this video. It's 2 minutes long. Watch this video, and I want you to join the project to protect our history and guard against the whitewashing and the historical revisionism that's happening in our country right now. Watch this video, and then I'll tell you where you can register.
According to the National Park Service website, Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Juneteenth are no longer listed as free admission days, but several days were added: Flag Day on June 14th and Constitution Day on September 17th.
President Trump targeted the Smithsonian museums, saying they are, quote, out of control, where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been.
Are you aware that this new version of the bill from the Senate removes the writings of Frederick Douglass?
I am.
Are you aware that this new version of the bill from the Senate removes the writings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yes.
During a New York Times interview, Donald Trump decried the impacts of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, arguing that it ultimately led to white people being, quote, very badly treated.
Everywhere I go, there's an angel there. There's an angel there.
The Sacred Memory Project is an initiative created to mobilize Black churches as sanctuaries of faith and sacred archives of history. Together, we aim to ensure that the Black church remains a trusted center for truth, cultural preservation, and intergenerational connection. We're after 100 plus Black churches pledge to be hubs of sacred memory.
He never leaves me alone. He never leaves me alone. He'll never leave me alone. He never leaves me alone. Everywhere I turn.
Yeah, so we want you, Pastor, we want you to register for that. Let me put the link in chat. Uh-oh, that's not it. 1 second. I'll put the link in chat for you to register for that. Again, it's completely free. After you register, you will get a kit that explains the project and your involvement. And so, yeah, want to see you registered for the Sacred Memory Project if you're a pastor or a church leader. All right, 6:30 p.m., y'all. 6:30 p.m. We're going to be back on live for the Black Church History virtual lectures. The topic tonight, 5 defining moments in Black church history. All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all. See you soon. Grace and peace. Bye-bye.